We're in the middle of our second course on mindfulness meditation, and it's called Deepening Our Roots, Tending the Garden of Our Heart, Mind, and World. And last week we talked about how we spend most of our life in a dark room with the laser pointer of our attention focused on just a small portion of that room, and how this practice is like switching on the lights and witnessing the room clearly. So today we'll continue on this theme a little bit more deeply under the particular context of welcoming the parts of ourselves or of our life that we normally leave out or ignore. So the title for today is Everything Belongs. Everything belongs. A sense of belonging and connection in the midst of our life. And the intention here is that we learn how to embrace the parts of our life or of ourselves that we don't like. We learn how to embrace difficulty with a sense of freedom in the midst of it, and how to embrace others and the world. But the first thing that I want to mention is that this is not intended for us to excuse or give our stamp of approval to the awful things that happen to us or to other people all around us, all around the world. But if we want to have an integrated and healthy mind that isn't split off from reality, we do have to find a way to acknowledge the difficulty without it leaving us incapable of facing it, without it keeping us from wise and compassionate action. So we can respond instead of react. And so in our last session, I mentioned how we often focus on things to the exclusion of everything else. And this is a useful tool and skill, like if you're doing something potentially dangerous and it requires focus, or if we just need to get some focused work done. But often we lose our sense of well-being in the midst of these moments. And so we're focusing on how having a more inclusive meditation practice can help us feel spacious even in the midst of difficulty, or in the middle of a task like checking and responding to email. So we're focusing in on the things that are often left out by us. And last week we briefly touched on the contents of the room. The contents of the room being our past, our memories, our thoughts and emotions, our five senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling, our ego, everything we've learned and been conditioned to think and believe about our world and our short time here. All of these things put together are what build a conscious picture of our life in each moment. And they're how we experience the world. And when the lights are off in the room and the laser pointer of our attention is wandering and then gets locked onto something like a thought or an emotion, there's a lot that we exclude and leave out of our understanding of reality in that moment. There's often much more to the story than what we tell ourselves in any given moment. And if we get locked onto something and it's the only thing we can see, there's a whole room of things that we're leaving out. Leaving things in the shadows, so to speak. And these are the things that can affect our reactions and our behavior, impacting our moods and the kinds of thought loops and cycles that we get in, how we feel and treat ourselves and others. Affecting the amount of joy that we might bring to our life in each moment, the amount of connection and love that we feel. And if we stay in the dark room with the laser pointer, we live in disharmony, in dissatisfaction, feeling like our life is a problem that needs to be fixed or solved. Like all the moments that we want things to be different than they already are, we feel frustrated or upset because something didn't go the way we had built it up in our mind. So this practice really helps us to realize that everything is already the way that it is. And that may sound cute, but to recognize it directly is another thing entirely, and there can be a lot of freedom in that. So this practice helps us to recognize that everything is already the way that it is. And our constant struggling with what is already here in this moment only makes it that much more difficult for us. So when we open to the spaciousness of the room is already allowing everything to be as it is. There's much more freedom and clarity when we stay there than when we stay with the lights off in the room. That can leave us fractured and separated off from the rest of the things that are here with us in this moment. So some teachers speak about this practice as welcoming the unwelcome. I've actually pulled a few excerpts from a book with the same name by Pema Chodron, and it's called Welcoming the Unwelcome. So I'll read a couple excerpts from that book. I got a couple other books that I intended to pull excerpts from and didn't end up doing so, but I thought I could still share the titles in case anyone's interested. So this is a quote from Pema Chodron, and she says, "Practicing open awareness is a gradual process of continually going back to seeing what we're seeing, smelling what we're smelling, feeling what we're feeling. Whatever happens, the method is to keep letting go of the extra stuff and return to just what's here," . Close quote. So we can either live our life mindfully, or we can wander around the dark room mindlessly, closed off to clarity, wisdom, and understanding that is otherwise freely available to us. So when we experience something difficult within ourselves, whether it's from our past or something current going on in our life, or some worry we have about the future, we often exclude important details like noticing and properly caring for the part of us that feels hurt or wounded. But we can actually live our life in an integrated way. And instead of going through life feeling separated off, fractured into different pieces, like life is happening to us, we can actually feel like a connected and integrated whole. We experience most of our life through the lens of our labels, our concepts, feelings, and stories about what's happening, rather than meeting the reality of the moment as it is. So part of this practice is simply liberating us from these limiting labels and concepts and beliefs about others and ourselves. Every time we get caught by an unpleasant emotion or difficult thoughts come up, without repressing them, ignoring them, or stuffing them back down, we can break their momentum and come back to open awareness. And when we practice in this way, we help give whatever difficulty might be here a lot more space so that it doesn't feel claustrophobic, with our laser pointer fixated only on the difficulty. Instead, we can feel our breathing, our whole body from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet, feeling ourselves grounded and supported by gravity. And the more we practice in this way, we start seeing that everything in the room is always changing, and that there's really nothing permanent or solid that we can hold on to. So if we remember the second foundation of mindfulness of feeling tones, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, rather than get caught up in our constant struggle of grasping and resisting everything that's in a constant state of change, we can actually come back to the only thing that isn't changing and is stable in the midst of it all, and simply witness the room itself with the lights switched on. Then the things that normally make us feel so stuck, we don't feel so caught by anymore, which turns out to be really great news for us. And sometimes we have moments that help us to see life's instability and impermanence more clearly. And Sometimes these moments can really take our breath away, so to speak. All of a sudden, it seems like there's no ground beneath our feet. And in these moments, it's so important for us to have something that we can come back to that is always present and always available. Pema Chodron goes on to say that this capacity to open, to experience things freshly, is always present in our mind. We may not sense it at all times, but it is waiting in the background. Close quote. So, like the lights in the room waiting to be switched on, if we're only willing to put down the laser pointer. So rather than hyperfixate and get cut off from reality in some sense, we know we have the open, spacious room with the lights on to come back to, which helps us to feel more stability in the midst of the changes. Especially when we have moments of groundlessness. It's helpful to come back to our awareness and even to recognize the literal ground beneath our feet. Everything we experience passes through our senses, our feeling tones, our thoughts and perceptions. And when we come back to the space that is holding it all, it helps us feel more connected to the moment and to our life, rather than split off with the sense that something is wrong. As we get more familiar with this fundamental aspect of our existence, we realize that each moment is far more enjoyable than the fictitious life that we struggle so hard to maintain and improve. So instead of staying stuck in the push and pull of grasping and resisting, when we open up, acknowledge, and begin to include more of what's in the room, it actually gives us more spaciousness to be with our life rather than feeling confined to our dissatisfaction. If you can't hear my dogs barking in the background, I apologize. Pema Chodron says that, quote, we relax and out of nowhere, we accept our experience without wanting anything to be more or less or different. We feel that everything, at least for the moment, is complete. And when our mind is open and fresh, we see beauty everywhere, including within ourselves. There's a sense of savoring the uniqueness of each moment. Things have never been just the way they are now, and nor will they ever be just this way again. Close quote. So whenever the next drama pops up in your mind or in your body, whether it's a difficult memory from childhood or more recent, or anger at your boss or partner or friend or a loved one, if you switch on the lights and come back to the open room of awareness in the midst of the mess, you are shifting your habit patterns. And rather than view ourselves or others or this moment through the limiting lens of how we are labeling and conceptualizing this moment, we can begin to meet ourselves and others and our life more fully because we aren't so caught up and stuck in the thoughts and emotions. I think this is the last quote that I have from Pema Chodron. And she says that all of us are the center of our own universe. And at the same time, we are anonymous people that others never see. We all have full lives with our own versions of joy and sorrow, hope and fear. If we take time to appreciate others in this way, strangers we encounter can become mirrors, showing us our own humanity and vulnerability. And then we can turn the natural warmth that we feel towards others into a natural warmth towards ourselves. We can start to recognize that our bad habits, our fears, the haunting thought that something is fundamentally wrong with us, these are just part of who we are, at least for the moment. And we can allow space for these uncomfortable thoughts and emotions to be there, not rejecting them, but also not buying into them. And I really love this last quote, so I'll close with this one. We belong simply because we are alive. Close quote. As always, no one can do this practice for us. And if we don't do it, we'll continue to stay in the dark room, following the laser pointer wherever it goes. But if we switch on the lights with this practice in our daily life, on and off the cushion, we'll find a deep and unshakable sense of belonging and connection within our own hearts and minds, in our relationships, in our life, and in the world around us. And may we make good use of our life in each moment. May our practice be of benefit not only to ourselves, but to all those who come into contact with us.